The broadcast is now.
So first, as far as what has changed, Beta has now been downgraded to a tropical depression. So tropical storm warnings have been discontinued, really not a wind concern anymore. The flooding threat continues, however, through tonight for both coastal tidal flooding and flooding from locally heavy rain. And we should start to see improvement tomorrow as what's left of Beta moves east of the area. Also, storm surge warnings are replaced by coastal flood warnings. Not a big change here. It just attributing the coastal flooding less from the system. So still coastal flooding, bottom line. So key points, key talking points here. We still have a significant flash flood threat today and tonight, basically from Liberty, Montgomery, Waller, Austin, and Colorado counties south to the coast. And that is the area our flash flood watch is in effect for. There's also been a high risk flash flooding issued by the Weather Prediction Center, and that's fairly rare, and I'll show you where that is located also. We are concerned about minor to moderate coastal flooding again tonight. We've seen that the past two high tides, each tide cycle should drop a little bit from here on out, but still coastal flood concern. We'll talk about river and bayou flooding later on. Katie Landry is on to address that. Tropical storm Beta, now centered east of Victoria, actually is a tropical depression now, and it's getting ready to start that very slow east, then east-northeast drift along or just inland of the Texas coast. And rain will continue near the center, but also ahead in bands like we've seen over the last 18 hours or so that are feeding in off the Gulf of Mexico. Conditions should improve from west to east late tonight and Wednesday. Here's a look at the latest track. You can see, and we'll look at this more closely, but you can see it starts out as a very, very slow east-northeast motion. But it does initialize the motion now northeast at a whopping 2 miles per hour. That's going to only very, very slightly increase as we go over the next 24 hours. But you can see the 7 a.m. Wednesday position here right near Galveston Bay. And as it gets just east, the winds are going to shift and we won't have that onshore flow anymore, which is giving us our elevated tides and our rainfall feeder bands. So once that shifts east, we should see the threats diminish and end really from those hazards. We will see some coastal flooding beyond this, but the significant rain should be over when that happens. Here's a look at the rainfall from the last 24 hours that occurred mostly yesterday afternoon and night. On the left, you see the radar inferred rainfall. And so you see a fairly large area of 3 to 5 inches of rain in red. But notice there were two bullseyes. There was one near Victoria, near the center of circulation, and then another one on the southwest side of Houston that included Sugarland, Pearland, and some other areas there. This area southwest of Houston was from what we talked about yesterday, a localized band, persistent band that produced very heavy rain. So that's the kind of thing that we may see again as we go through the day today and through the night tonight. A localized band of perhaps 5 to 10 inches of rain additional to what has already fallen. And you can see that band as well in the observations. These are measured rainfall amounts from the Harris County Mesonet. And so all the gauges within this circle that I've drawn in had pretty much greater than 10 inches of rain. So where will that next band set up? We don't really know for sure. Here's a look at the radar loop, a recent radar loop, and you can see a couple things. You can see the center of circulation there, as I said, east of Victoria. It doesn't appear to have started that motion as of the time of this loop, which was about an hour ago, but should start to trend toward the east as we go through the afternoon. Tropical depression beta there. And then notice these bands coming in off the Gulf. The rainfall from these bands less intense than we saw last afternoon and evening and overnight. But the bands could become more intense this afternoon, especially as we might get a little bit of heating even. So we're really not out of the woods yet. We've got to get really through the next 24 hours before we can say goodbye to beta. Here's a look at a recent satellite image, really from not long ago at all, just about half an hour ago. And again, you see that swirl there east of Victoria, maybe a hint of a slight northeast drift there, but very slight. And then notice over the Gulf of Mexico, these bright lines feeding up into southeast Texas and sort of up I-45. These are our bands. This is what they look like on satellite. And so as beta slowly drifts east, these bands will continue to stream in off the Gulf and provide a threat for locally heavy rain and even isolated tornadoes, although that's kind of a minimal threat. Here's a look at the watches and warnings. Now, the tropical storm warnings you see in red, those are canceled as of now. There just hadn't been an updated map but when I put this together. So those are going to drop off the map. The tropical storm warnings are going to disappear. But we will still have the flash flood watch in dark green. That includes the counties you see here from Liberty to Montgomery on over and then on to the coast. The bright green areas are flash flood warnings, and that's due to the heavy rain we had last night and early this morning. So you see that there also on the map. Won't talk about rivers a whole lot. Katie is going to address that, but I did want to show you some of the river gauges that are either in flood or near flood. First, looking at the right-hand graphic here, this is from the Harris County Flood Control website, flood warning system. And you can remember where the heavy rain fell, sort of in the south part of Harris and also in the southwest. And so it's no surprise all those red dots there indicate bayous or streams in flood. And the yellow triangles indicate near bankful. So not surprising, these are the areas that have been hit so far with the heavy rain band that we had last night and during the early morning hours. We could see that next band set up somewhere else. We don't really know where exactly it's going to be. And the same idea here for some different river gauges. You see the high flow and river levels occurring where we had the heavy rain, not surprisingly. Let's talk a little bit about tides. I mentioned yesterday afternoon that the tide that occurred last night and this morning would be a little lower than the night before, but probably not as low as the tide models were indicating. And that's what happened. You can see bay entrance last night. We got right up near 5 feet again, almost to the same level as the previous night. Notice, and I've also labeled the times here a little bit better, a little bit more understandable. These are local times in red. So this is 7 a.m. this morning. Should see bay entrance move into low tide during the day, and then back to a next high tide tonight. And notice the surge model has it significantly lower, maybe just a little bit above 4. I think it'll probably be a little bit above this. Probably somewhere in that 4.5 foot range, but lower than the previous night. Each high tide a little bit less than the previous one, but not as rapid as the model is showing. So a little bit of gradual improvement each day as far as coastal flooding is concerned. Eagle Point, this is more in reference to the bay, Galveston Bay. You can see the last night's high tide, or actually the one this morning, not very different than the one the night before. So still significant coastal flooding going on at these levels. And then we should see improvement, as I said, with each subsequent high tide, but not as big a drop as shown in this surge model. As far as the rainfall threat is concerned, I mentioned earlier that the Weather Prediction Center has put a part of our area in a high risk. This is a very rare thing. They don't do this very often. And so they've circled this area in pink as especially concerned for additional flash flooding. Now remember, this is where some of the heaviest rain has already fallen. And so with additional bands likely pivoting in later today and tonight, it's not surprising that's one of the areas that's been zeroed in on as an area of concern. But also a fairly broad moderate risk area. So these are just indicating the level of concern, the level of risk we have for the flash flood threat over the next 24 hours. And then last but not least, we do still have the possibility of an isolated tornado or two in the kind of dark green area. This would be along any stronger bands that could develop today. We could get a few spinning storms. We did have a couple yesterday, but we never did verify any kind of tornado or waterspout from them. So some takeaway points here. A combination of elevated tides and locally heavy rainfall is creating a significant flood threat across parts of the area, especially coastal counties and the next tier inland, and really the next tier above that. This should read tropical depression beta now continues to weaken. There's less concern about winds, tropical storm force gusts, at this point not even likely near bands, so not much of a wind concern. Beta actually closer to Victoria, north of Matagorda Bay, and we still have the possibility of a tornado or two. And this is actually from yesterday. I need to update this, but it does show what we were saying yesterday about the concern for these heavier bands of rain. And in fact, we did get one last night. Additional bands of rain are possible. We are looking at an additional 5 to 10 inches of rain, especially in that watch area and the area here in red and pink. Another 5 to 10 inches could bring storm totals 20 inches or higher in some spots, especially given that we've had some 10, 11 inch measured already. So that is the update on tropical depression